The moment my sister laughed at me, the room followed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to let everyone know it was acceptable. Glasses paused midair. A few people smiled out of reflex. Others looked down, pretending to adjust napkins or check their phones. No one stopped her. No one asked me if I was okay. That's how public humiliation works. It doesn't need shouting. It just needs permission. I stood there, empty hands, steady face, listening as she turned my life into a joke wrapped in a toast. And while everyone watched me, waiting for a reaction, I noticed something else. Her fiancé had gone completely still. His smile vanished. His face drained of color. And his eyes locked onto mine like he had just seen a ghost. The engagement party was held in a private room of an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind with soft lighting, glass walls, and music that stayed politely in the background. Everything was tasteful, neutral, carefully curated to project success. My sister loved places like this, places where appearances did half the work for her. I arrived alone, 10 minutes late, dressed simply in a dark blue dress I'd owned for years. Nothing flashy, nothing that demanded attention. That had always been my strategy: blend in, stay quiet, take up as little space as possible. She spotted me immediately. My sister stood near the center of the room, radiant, confident, holding her champagne glass like it was an extension of her hand. People gravitated toward her without effort. They always had. She was the kind of woman who made success look effortless, even when it wasn't. Her fiancé stood beside her, well-dressed, polished, impressive in the way people like to describe with words like solid and reliable. He nodded politely as guests congratulated him, smiling on cue. I took a seat near the back, hoping to pass unnoticed. I should have known better. When it was time for speeches, my sister tapped her glass lightly, the room responding instantly. Silence fell. Faces turned toward her, expectant, warm. She smiled. Then she laughed. "And of course," she said, glancing in my direction, "I have to thank my little sister for being here tonight." A few heads turned. Not all. Just enough. "She's always been consistent," my sister continued. "Never flashy, never ambitious, but reliable in her own way." Laughter rippled through the room, soft, uncertain, but present. "She's still figuring things out," she added, her tone playful, which I think is admirable. Not everyone needs to succeed to be happy, right? More laughter. Louder this time. I felt it settle over me like a weight, heavy, invisible, undeniable. My face stayed calm. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply stood there, holding my glass, letting the words land where they always did. My parents were near the front. My mother smiled tightly. My father looked away. No one interrupted. That was the part that hurt the most. My sister raised her glass again. "So let's all toast to growth, to moving forward, and to knowing your place." That line landed harder than the rest. As applause followed, polite and automatic, I finally looked away from my sister, and that's when I saw him. Her fiancé. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't smiling. He was staring straight at me. Not with curiosity, not confusion. With recognition. His hand trembled slightly as he lowered his glass. His jaw tightened. The color drained from his face so quickly it was impossible to miss if you were looking directly at him. And for the first time that night, someone in that room looked at me not like I was invisible, but like I mattered. My name is Claire Whitman. I'm 32 years old. And that was the moment everything began to change. People often assume that being overlooked happens suddenly, in one sharp moment. It doesn't. It happens slowly, quietly, over years, sometimes over a lifetime. Growing up, my sister was never just my sister. She was the standard, the example, the one teachers praised, neighbors remembered, relatives asked about first. At family gatherings, her name was spoken with pride, mine with courtesy. She was confident early, loud when she needed to be, charming without trying. I learned quickly that next to her, silence was safer than competition. When she brought home trophies, my parents framed them. When I brought home report cards, they nodded and said, "That's nice, Claire." Not unkindly, just efficiently. I was the child who didn't cause problems. the one who adapted, the one who learned that approval was easier to lose than to earn, and that staying small kept the peace. By the time we were teenagers, the roles were set. My sister chased attention and reward. I chased stability. She dreamed out loud. I planned quietly. She went to parties. I stayed home and worked. She spoke. I listened. And somehow, that became the story everyone agreed on. When adulthood arrived, the gap only widened. My sister married young, married well, and made sure everyone knew it. Her life looked impressive from the outside: career milestones, polished social media posts, carefully staged holidays. I took a different path, a quieter one. I moved cities more than once. I changed jobs without announcing it. I didn't post about my accomplishments, partly because I didn't need applause, and partly because I'd learned early that sharing only invited comparison, and comparison was never fair. At family dinners, my sister's updates came first. Promotions, investments, engagements, plans, dreams spoken confidently, as if the world was already on her side. When it was my turn, the table usually fell quiet. "So, Claire," someone would ask gently, "what are you up to these days?" And I would answer honestly but briefly, "I'm working. I'm busy. I'm doing fine." Those answers satisfied them. No one asked follow-up questions. Eventually, they stopped asking altogether. My parents didn't mean harm. I know that now. But intention doesn't erase impact. They supported my sister loudly and me silently, and over time, silence became expectation. I was the one they didn't worry about. The one they assumed would manage. The one who didn't need recognition. So, I stopped offering myself for it. What they never understood was that my quiet wasn't emptiness. It was choice. I learned to keep my life private because privacy was power. I learned that the less people knew about me, the fewer assumptions they could make. And I learned that success didn't need witnesses to be real. I didn't hide out of shame. I hid out of clarity. There were moments, of course, when it hurt. When I sat at family tables listening to versions of myself that weren't true. When my sister joked about my lack of direction, and everyone laughed, relieved that the joke wasn't about them. But I never corrected her. Because correcting someone requires believing they're capable of hearing you. And I had learned slowly, painfully, that my family didn't want a new version of me. They were comfortable with the one they'd created. So I let them keep it. By the time my sister announced her engagement, the narrative was set in stone. She was the success story. I was the background character, the contrast. Which made that night, the engagement party, feel almost inevitable. Her moment, her spotlight, her audience. And me? I was there to play my role, the quiet sister. The harmless comparison, the punchline wrapped in a smile. That's why no one spoke up when she mocked me. They thought they knew who I was. They thought they knew my place. And that misunderstanding, so carefully built over decades, was about to cost them far more than my pride. Because the one thing they never learned about me was this: I don't explain myself. And when I finally let people see me, it's never by accident. If my sister had stopped after that first joke, the night might have passed like so many others: uncomfortable, forgettable, quietly painful. I would have gone home early, replayed it once or twice in my head, and then let it sink back into the familiar place where disappointments lived. But she didn't stop. She had tasted the room's reaction, and it emboldened her. As servers moved between tables refilling glasses, my sister continued to speak, her voice light, conversational, as if she were simply sharing amusing family trivia. "You know," she said, smiling toward a group of her friends, "Claire has always been very selective about ambition." A few people chuckled. "I mean, not everyone wants more," she added. "Some people are perfectly happy staying exactly where they are." Her eyes flicked toward me for a brief second, quick enough to deny intent, slow enough to land. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but my face remained still. Years of practice had taught me how to look unbothered, even when every word pressed against old bruises. Someone near the bar laughed a little too loudly. Another guest nodded, as if this explanation finally made sense of me. My sister leaned closer to her fiancé, resting a hand on his arm. "That's what I love about him," she said. "Drive, direction, vision." She let the contrast hang in the air. Then she looked back at me. Claire's more flexible, she continued. She doesn't really believe in titles or long-term plans. Isn't that right? All eyes turned toward me now. Not aggressively, not cruelly, just expectantly. Waiting. For a smile. A joke. A denial. I lifted my glass slightly, acknowledging the attention without feeding it. I believe in doing my work well, I said calmly. That's usually enough. The room went quiet for half a second, just long enough for discomfort to creep in. My sister laughed to break it. See? Always so modest. S. She turned back to the crowd. She's been doing her work for years, she added, still figuring things out. My parents sat only a few feet away. My mother's fingers tightened around her glass, but she didn't say anything. My father stared at the tablecloth like it might offer guidance. Their silence felt louder than my sister's voice. That's when I noticed the shift again. Her fiancé. He had stopped nodding along. His posture had changed, shoulders tense, smile frozen in place. He stared down at his drink as if trying to steady himself. I didn't look away. Something in him seemed to register that. My sister, oblivious or indifferent, pressed on. I always say, at least one of us had to be practical, she joked. Someone had to balance the ambition in the family. A ripple of laughter followed, thinner this time, less confident. One woman near the window avoided my gaze entirely. A man near the entrance cleared his throat and checked his watch. The energy in the room shifted, subtle, uneasy. But my sister mistook that unease for attention. And honestly, she said, lowering her voice slightly, it must be nice. No pressure. No expectations. She shrugged. No one depending on you. That line landed hard. It wasn't just mockery anymore. It was dismissal, erasure. I felt something settle inside me, not anger, not hurt, but a kind of clarity. The realization that she wasn't teasing to entertain, she was asserting something, reclaiming space, reminding the room who mattered. I remained still. Across from her, her fiancé finally looked up. His eyes met mine. And this time, he didn't look away. His face had gone pale. Not nervous pale. Shocked pale. The kind that comes when recognition arrives, faster than denial can stop it. My sister noticed his stillness at last. You okay? She whispered, smiling for the room. He didn't answer. He just stared at me, breathing shallowly, as if the ground beneath him had shifted. And in that moment, I knew. Whatever story my sister had been telling about me all these years, it was about to collide with the truth. The room didn't go silent all at once. It thinned. Conversations resumed in fragments, half-sentences, polite laughter that didn't quite land. Glasses clinked too loudly. Someone adjusted the music, lowering it a notch, as if volume alone could smooth the tension. My sister kept smiling, but it had changed. It was sharper now, more performative. She sensed something was off and instinctively leaned into control. Her fiancé hadn't moved. He stood where he was, shoulders rigid, eyes fixed on me with an intensity that felt out of place in a room meant for celebration. He didn't blink, he didn't speak. His hand tightened around his glass until his knuckles turned white. I had seen that look before. Not often, but enough to recognize it. It was the look of someone trying to reconcile two versions of reality at the same time. My sister noticed his stiffness and laughed lightly, brushing it off. He gets overwhelmed in crowds, she said to the people nearest her. Always thinking too much. She squeezed his arm playfully, as if to coax him back into the role she expected him to play. He didn't respond. A woman near the bar leaned toward her companion and whispered something, eyes darting between him and me. A man at the edge of the room shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable, scanning the space for an exit or an excuse. The unease was spreading not fast, but steadily, like a hairline crack forming across glass. I stayed where I was. There was a strange calm settling over me now. Not relief, not anticipation, just certainty. Whatever was happening wasn't something I needed to push. It was unfolding on its own. My sister tried again. Honestly, she said, lifting her glass, we should all relax. It's a party. She laughed, louder than necessary. Claire's always been quiet, mysterious even. You never know what she's thinking. Her eyes flicked toward me, daring me to contradict her. I didn't. Silence. I had learned, made people uncomfortable. It forced them to fill the gaps themselves. Her fiancé finally looked away from me only to stare at the floor, jaw clenched, breath shallow. He swallowed hard, like someone bracing for impact. "Are you sure you're okay?" my sister asked again, this time lower, more insistent. He shook his head slightly. Not a yes, not a no. Just enough to confirm that something was very wrong. My parents exchanged a look from across the room. Confusion, concern, and something else flickered between them, recognition, maybe, that the night was slipping out of their control. Still, no one intervened. No one ever does when discomfort is subtle enough to deny. A server approached with a tray, hesitated when she sensed the tension, then retreated without saying a word. Even the staff could feel it now. I met his gaze one last time. There was fear in his eyes. Not panic, fear sharpened by memory. Whatever he saw when he looked at me, it wasn't speculation. It was confirmation. My sister, mistaking the stillness for attention, straightened her posture, preparing to speak again to reclaim the room, to regain momentum. She didn't realize she was about to lose it entirely, because the warning signs were already there. And once recognition takes hold, there is no pretending it didn't happen. The moment didn't explode. It cracked. My sister lifted her glass again, ready to reclaim the room with another joke, another carefully sharpened smile. But before she could speak, her fiancé took a step forward. Just one. It was enough. The room noticed immediately. Chairs scraped softly against the floor as people adjusted in their seats. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the music seemed too loud all of a sudden, as if it hadn't been invited into whatever was about to happen. He set his glass down on the nearest table. His hand was trembling now, no longer subtle, no longer deniable. "Claire," he said. My name landed heavily in the air. Not "hey," not "excuse me," not the polite distance people use with strangers. Claire. He said it the way someone does when they already know you, when the knowing comes from somewhere deeper than introductions. My sister turned toward him, startled. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her smile tightening as she glanced at the guests. "You're interrupting." He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on me, wide and unblinking, as if he were afraid that if he looked away, the truth would rearrange itself. His voice caught. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I know you." A murmur rippled through the room. I felt every gaze shift from curiosity to confusion to sudden attention. People leaned in without meaning to. This was no longer polite discomfort. This was interest. My sister laughed, sharp and forced. "Of course you know her. She's my sister." "Ate." "No," he said quietly. The word was barely louder than a breath, but it cut clean through the room. "I know her," he repeated. "From before." My sister's hand tightened around her glass. "You're being strange," she said, still smiling, still performing. "You've met her once or twice. That's all." He shook his head. Slowly, deliberately. "No," he said again. "That's not it." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the staff froze. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't rescue him from the moment he'd stepped into. Some truths need space to arrive fully. His gaze dropped briefly, as if gathering courage from somewhere low and steady. When he looked up again, his face had gone completely pale. "You were the one who signed off on the review," he said to me. A breath was pulled from the room. "The final one," he continued. "The one that decided whether my firm would be cleared or investigated." My sister blinked. Once, twice. "What is he talking about?" she asked, her voice brittle now, the edges beginning to crack. She looked around, searching for reassurance. "This isn't funny." I could feel it then, the shift. The point of no return. "I didn't know it was you at first," he said, his words tumbling faster now. "You never spoke much in those meetings. You didn't introduce yourself. You just listened." He swallowed hard. "But you asked the questions no one else did." My sister's laughter faltered completely. "Stop," she said. "You're embarrassing yourself." He finally turned to her. "I recognized her the moment she looked at me," he said. "The way she does when she's already decided something." A few people gasped softly. Someone whispered, "What is happening?" I took a breath, then not to speak, but to steady myself. This wasn't my reveal to control. It never had been. She was the one who held the vote, he continued, his voice steadier now, as if the truth itself were holding him upright. The one who could have shut us down completely. My sister's face drained of color. That's impossible, she said. She doesn't. She stopped, the sentence collapsing before it could finish. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. Not as a comparison, not as a punchline, but as an unknown. He turned back to me, eyes searching. You chose not to, he said. You gave us time, conditions, a chance to fix what was broken. Is sender. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the lights. I never forgot that, he said softly. I never forgot you. My sister's hand slipped, her glass shattered on the floor, the sound sharp and sudden, but no one reacted. No one was looking at her anymore. All eyes were on me. On the sister they thought they understood. On the woman they had underestimated. I met his gaze, calm and even. I did my job, I said simply. Nothing more. Nothing less. The truth didn't need decoration. And in that moment, as the room struggled to rearrange its understanding of me, my sister realized something far worse than humiliation. She realized she had mocked the one person in the room who had always seen clearly. And the silence that followed was no longer awkward. It was absolute. No one clapped, no one laughed, no one moved. The room entered a different kind of stillness, the kind that settles after something irreversible has been spoken aloud. My sister stood frozen near the center of it all, her hands empty, her champagne gone, her practiced smile erased in an instant. Around her, guests shifted uncomfortably, suddenly unsure where to look or how to behave, as if the rules of the evening had changed without warning. Some stared at the floor, others studied their glasses. No one wanted to be caught reacting the wrong way. My sister's fiancé stepped back slowly, running a hand through his hair, the weight of what he had revealed finally settling on his shoulders. My parents stood nearby, silent and shaken, realizing too late how little they truly knew about the daughter they thought required no attention. For the first time, confusion replaced certainty in their expressions, and it showed. The guests, once relaxed and entertained, now felt like witnesses to something deeply personal that was never meant to be revealed this way. My sister finally found her voice, but it came out sharp, defensive, already searching for blame instead of understanding. Why didn't you ever tell us? She demanded, as if silence had been my crime. I looked at her calmly and answered the truth. You never asked. The simplicity of the words struck harder than anger ever could. Shame moved through her face in stages, denial first, then confusion, then the slow realization that the room was no longer hers. People who had laughed earlier now avoided her eyes, unwilling to share responsibility for the moment. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, no urge to explain myself. What I felt was distance, the clean kind that forms when illusions finally collapse. The power shift did not come from anything I said or claimed. It happened because truth entered the room and refused to leave. My sister stood exposed, not as the golden child, not as the successful one, but as someone who had underestimated silence. The collapse was complete, and the room knew it. No music resumed, no conversation returned, and no one attempted to pretend that the evening could continue as planned. My sister's authority, once effortless, had dissolved without a single argument. She did not lose power to me. She lost it to reality. I remained where I was, steady and quiet, while understanding rearranged itself around me. This was not revenge, and it was not victory. It was the natural consequence of being underestimated for far too long. Nothing more needed to be said, because the truth had already spoken clearly. The room remained silent, holding the weight of what had been revealed. And in that silence, my sister finally understood that the story she told about me no longer belonged to her. It belonged to the truth she had tried to laugh away. And everyone in the room felt it settle. Without applause, without noise, without mercy. At last, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain myself. I didn't correct the story anyone had believed for years. I simply stood there, letting the room finish the work on its own. My sister opened her mouth as if to say something, anything to regain control. An apology, perhaps, or an excuse, or another joke to soften the damage. but no sound came out. She had spent so long speaking for me that she no longer knew how to speak for herself. Her fiancé shifted beside her, eyes downcast now, shoulders folded inward. He didn't look at me again. He didn't need to. The recognition had already done its job. Someone near the back cleared their throat. Another guest checked their phone, suddenly remembering somewhere else they needed to be. The room was quietly rearranging its loyalties. This was the moment people expect retaliation. A speech. A sharp line. A public correction delivered with precision. I offered none of it. Instead, I spoke one sentence. That's all I wanted to say. Nothing dramatic. Nothing triumphant. Just final. The simplicity of it seemed to confuse them more than anger ever could. There was no argument to latch onto. No emotion to dismiss. Without resistance, there was nothing left to fight. My sister looked at me then. Really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw something unfamiliar in her eyes. Uncertainty. She had always believed power came from being louder, sharper, more visible. She had never learned what happens when power refuses to perform. My parents stood still, caught between guilt and pride, neither quite forming yet. They didn't approach me. They didn't stop me. They finally understood that whatever space I had built for myself didn't require their permission. I picked up my coat calmly, ignoring the shattered glass on the floor, the paused music, the eyes tracking my movement. No one stopped me. No one challenged me. As I walked toward the exit, I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not relief, not joy, but certainty. The kind that doesn't fade when the room empties. Behind me, I could sense my sister shrinking into the silence she had created, surrounded by people who now saw her differently. I didn't turn back. Justice doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply arrives, quiet and undeniable, and leaves people to sit with what they've done. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need validation. The truth had stood on its own, and that was enough. I stepped outside into the cool night air and let the door close behind me without looking back. The city moved on as if nothing had happened. Cars passed, laughter drifted from a bar down the street. Somewhere nearby, music played softly through an open window. The world had not paused for that room, or for the story that had just unraveled inside it. And that felt right. I walked slowly, letting my breathing settle, my heels clicking gently against the pavement. There was no rush to go anywhere, no need to replay the moment or rehearse what I might have said differently. Because I hadn't lost my composure, and I hadn't betrayed myself. For years, I had been the quiet one, the easy comparison, the sister people felt comfortable underestimating. I used to think silence meant weakness, that if I didn't defend myself, I must deserve the version of me others believed. I know better now. Silence can be a boundary. Privacy can be power. And dignity doesn't require witnesses. That night didn't change who I was. It simply revealed it to people who had never bothered to look closely before. I don't know what my family said after I left. I don't know how my sister explained herself, or how long the room stayed quiet once I was gone. And for the first time, I truly don't care. Some realizations arrive too late to fix anything. They're only meant to teach. If you're listening to this and you've ever been dismissed, talked over, or made small in your own family, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your worth. You don't need to prove yourself loudly. And you don't have to correct every false story told about you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is live well and let the truth catch up on its own. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. And if you appreciate stories about quiet strength, self-respect, and justice without revenge, consider subscribing to this channel. Sometimes, the strongest voices don't shout. They simply walk away whole.